The time is now 6:49. The July 26th meeting of the Kansas City Public Schools Board of Directors will now come to order. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Miss Manser,
Here.
Miss Wolfsey,
Here.
Miss Lewis, Mr. Oates,
Here.
Mr. Fierro,
Here.
Mr. Evans, Mrs. Morris,
Here.
Dr. Hartsfield,
Here.
and Miss Robinson.
Here, there is a quorum present. It would now be in order to approve the agenda. If there is not an objection to approving the agenda tonight, the agenda is approved. For our regular business meeting minute, or I'm sorry, for our, do we have? Okay. The chair recognizes Carl Evans to present this proposal. Item 2.01.
Okay. I have two resolutions. One is for Dr. Skaggs, and the other one is for Mr. Curtis Jones. Mr. Skaggs will be first. It is with the utmost respect that the members of the Kansas City Public Schools Board of Directors recognize the recent passing of Mr. Edward Skaggs Sr., 85, who made a significant and positive impact on the entire community as a public servant, pastor, and leader. Dr. Skaggs deeply valued education and admirably overcame great challenges to earn a Master's of Arts degree in Public Relations and a PhD in Organizational Design from K-State University. He honorably served his nation as a member of the U.S. military and was a passionate pastor who served the entire Kansas City community as a 20-year member of Metropolitan AME Zion Church. Dr. Skaggs served with distinction as a member of the KCPS Board of Directors, where he put his problem-solving and critical thinking skills to use on behalf of children across the school system. Board of Directors of the Kansas City Public Schools applaud Dr. Skaggs for his contributions to our schools, his legacy for our families, and the examples he set for our students.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It is moved and seconded to approve the resolution honoring Curtis C. Honoring Edward W. Skaggs Sr. Is there any questions or discussion? Will the secretary please call the roll?
Miss Manser,
Yes.
Miss Wolfsey,
Yes.
Miss Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Oates,
Yes.
Mr. Fierro,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Mrs. Morris,
Yes.
Dr. Hartsfield,
Yes.
and Miss Robinson.
Yes, there is a majority in favor, and the resolution honoring Edward W. Skaggs is approved. For item number 2.02, the chair recognizes, I'm sorry, item 2.01, they're switched. The chair recognizes Carl Evans.
Yeah, this resolution is for Mr. Curtis C. Jones Sr. It is with the utmost respect that members of the Kansas City Public Schools Board of Directors recognize the recent passing of Curtis C. Jones Sr., 83, who made a significant and positive impact on the entire community as an educator, leader, and volunteer. At a time when many African Americans were prevented from pursuing higher education, he earned a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Industrial Arts from Jackson State University in Mississippi, and later earned an educational specialist degree from the University of Missouri at Kansas City and a Master's of Art degree from the University of Northern Colorado. Mr. Jones joined the Kansas City Public Schools as an industrial arts teacher at Central High School in 1962 and was recognized for his talents and community as a teacher. He proudly served as principal at what is now known as Manual Career and Technical Center until his retirement in 1993, where he helped guide a whole generation of young people to productive careers. This 21st Board of Directors of the Kansas City Public Schools recognizes Curtis C. Jones for his many years of service to the entire community.
The chair recognizes Carl Evans to offer the motion to approve the resolution.
So moved.
Second.
It's moved and seconded to approve the resolution honoring Curtis Jones Sr. Is there any debate on the motion, on the resolution? Seeing none, the secretary will call the roll.
Miss Manser,
Yes.
Miss Wolfsey,
Yes.
Miss Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Oates.
Yes.
Mr. Fierro.
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Mrs. Morris,
Yes.
Dr. Hartsfield.
Yes.
And Miss Robinson.
Yes, the resolution is approved. We will pause to invite the families up to take photos and for Mr. Evans to be able to give them the resolution. So,
Thank you. I'm going to do Mr. Skaggs first. Is there anyone from the family to receive his resolution? Ms. Jones, would you please come up and bring whomever you would like to be in this picture with you?
On behalf of the Curtis Jones family, I'd like to thank the Kansas City, Missouri School District Board. I'm the daughter, Kimberly Jones, and I'd like to thank the Kansas City Public School District Board for recognizing and establishing a resolution for my father. I remember the riots in the '60s. I know I don't look that old. But I remember the riots in the '60s, the integration of the public school system, the strikes they used to have. So when the teachers stopped working, my dad always bought my mom something to give her hope that things would change. And for the 38 years of service to the community and a lot of service and mentoring to several students and people of the community, this is more than an honor to have a resolution in his honor. And I'd like to recognize one of his oldest friends is Jack Bush, who is part of the Hall of Fame of basketball in the state of Missouri.
And Mr. Jack Bush is my godfather, and he was the last person that said, "See you, buddy," when my father passed away. So he is an integral part of our family and the growth of being here for the last, how old am I? 54 years in the city of Kansas City. And all of these people are part of our family. They're not just friends, they are family. He was also a part of Kappa Alpha Psi. I see that right back there. Kappa Alpha Psi, St. Louis Church, Kiwanis, St. Peter Claver, and a whole bunch of other stuff that people didn't know he was part of. What was that, Phi Delta Kappa? Because he was so darn smart, and y'all know he was a pill. But he was so darn smart. But he was an influential Freedom. Where's Freedom? Freedom here? Oh, there we go. Yeah, Freedom. So he was an integral part of this community, and I'm proud to say that I'm his daughter. And Freedom, friends from Mississippi, grandchildren, teachers, the oldest friend. How old are you, Papa? He just had 93, 94, 92, 92 years young. My mother, they were married for almost 60 years, but it was more than that because she gave him a tough time. Who's his first students? One of his first, oh, hey, artists. One of his first students that he mentored, and Linda May. So, and neighbor, Miss Wilson. So I want to thank everyone for being here. And I could sit here and talk all day. Mama's telling me to hurry up. But again, thank you for everyone's support in remembrance of my father, Curtis C. Jones.
I'm going to have you all scoot in, okay? Scoot in a little bit more. There you go. Okay. Okay. And 1, 2, and 3. Hang on. 1, 2, 3. One more. Very good. Thank you.
We have four persons who have indicated they wish to address the board this evening. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker. We have Roger Smith with Research Psychiatric Center Programs and Services. Welcome, Mr. Smith. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I appreciate you letting me have 3 minutes. Research has an adolescent unit that has 24 beds. We service patients from 12 to 18 years old. There's some private, some double bed rooms. If you're 12, you're 18, or you're transgendered, we like to let you stay in your own room. If you come in and you're a transgendered patient, we like to let them stay on the side they identify with. We have a psychiatrist that rounds every day and a pediatrician. As you can imagine, some of these kids haven't seen a physician regularly in a long time, so that helps with their medical needs, in addition to the psychiatric and behavioral health care needs that our psychiatrist provides. We have a licensed educator that comes in every day and helps them, helps the patients with the educational materials they bring in, and if they don't bring anything in, he helps them. We have a limited amount of computers with very selective internet access that they can use for their educational needs. We also have a couple of programs for transitional levels of care. We have a partial hospital program, which is basically runs from 8:30 to 3 every day. They come in, they get about the same services that they would get as an inpatient. They just get to go home at the end of the day. And then we offer something called intensive outpatient therapy. It's an intensive outpatient program. It's kind of a middle fitter program. If you come into the hospital and you don't meet criteria for an inpatient stay, but need a higher level of care, this runs 3 hours, 3 days a week that meets in the evening for about 4 weeks. We have a wonderful staff of counselors, therapists, who will, at the end of that, help them find therapists and psychiatrists in the area to transition back out into the public. We are also partners with the Jason Foundation, which is a foundation that works to educate parents, physicians, caregivers, teachers on suicide. It's a suicide prevention organization. And we have resources available, and we talked to Molly and her group about partnering with the school district to do a better job in terms of communications for the patients we do get, and doing some work in the schools to prevent some of them from showing up on our doorstep to begin with. And I have some stuff to hand out to you guys as well. So, thank you.
Thank you. You may hand that information to Natalie Allen, and she'll get that to us. Thank you. Next on the agenda is Barbara Johnson to discuss restorative justice, and there is a handout that's at your dais that you can refer to. Welcome. You have 3 minutes, Ms. Johnson.
Kansas City Public School Board meeting July 26, 6:30. Moore Square, talking points for restorative justice. We, the members of the Moore Square organization, ask that the Kansas City, Missouri School Board commits to no expulsion or out-of-school suspension of children, students from pre-K through 5th grade, except in the cases of physical violence or severe drug or alcohol offenses beginning with the 2017 to 2018 school year. We, the members of the Moore Square organization, ask that the Kansas City, Missouri School Board commits to an all-out effort to incorporate a program of restorative justice in the public and charter schools of the Kansas City District Schools. We, the members of the Moore Square organization, ask that the Kansas City, Missouri School Board commits to the development and practice of a training program for staff, parents, community members, and concerned clergy in restorative justice. We, the members of the Moore Square organization, ask that the Kansas City, Missouri School Board commits to implementing responsible and accountable practices of school disciplinary reforms that encourage love, respect, and relationship building among our Black and brown children. We, the members of the Moore Square organization, ask that the Kansas City, Missouri School Board commits to the principles of restorative justice practices in schools. The philosophical underpinnings of restorative justice incorporate 5 principles. 1, relationship building. 2, respect. 3, responsibility. 4, repairing breaches, reconciliation. And 5, reintegration. We, the members of the Moore Square organization, ask that the Kansas City, Missouri School Board commits to continuing efforts to implement, monitor, and support restorative justice within all our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is Denisha Jones. Thank you for supporting the House of Restoration. Is Ms. Jones here? Next on the agenda, we have Tom Love to discuss green shirting. Welcome, Mr. Love. You have 3 minutes when you get to the podium. So.
Oops. Well, I'd like to talk about red shirting first. Red shirting's already taken place in the school district. It happened about 4 years ago. So the 3rd graders this year are going to have higher reading scores because they were red shirted. The August, September birthday kids were red shirted. So I'm guessing we're going to have a 4 or 5% increase in reading score, people reading on grade level, because the bottom 16 to 17% of the students were held out. And so when you look at the averages, it will probably bring up the score about that much. Green shirting is a concept that is where you allow a student to do 2 years of kindergarten. It's something that Finland implemented, and they went to the top in the world. All the students start when they're 7 years old. What I'd like to see happen is to allow as a first step in the green shirting idea, is to allow the kindergarten students who are summer birthday children to be green shirted if they need it. Let me give you an example. First of all, the students that were red shirted, they were starting kindergarten as 4-year-olds. Under state law, you're required to be 5, but it was only allowed in Kansas City and St. Louis. It's a big mistake. Fortunately, when I brought it to the attention of Dr. Green, Mr. Kitsy, our early childhood guy, said, this is a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. This is just basic. People don't realize that even if you're 5 and you're a boy, and you're one of the youngest, if you're just a summer birthday boy, you're really the equivalent of 4.5 years old. And so those children fail, not because they're not capable, it's because they're literally too young. They haven't fully developed yet. So why not allow them a second chance? We had 1,581 first graders several years ago, and out of that group, 30% of them, nearly 500 children, were at kindergarten level when they were forced to go into second. I shouldn't say forced. Yeah, they were forced because they were at kindergarten level. Their parents or the district should have stopped that. Those kids, their lives are messed up because of the lack of being able to read. It just doesn't make any sense. So, you know, Montessori schools or whatever, they look at the various levels of the student and they adjust it. We need to be adjustable. We need to allow, or at least let the parents know. When we went to the Hale Cook School several months back, the principal, a great principal, right, said how great they were doing, and they were doing great. Looked to me like it was 60-some% of the students reading on grade level. We went over to, what's this school over here in Holmes that we went to? The principal wouldn't even put up the reading scores on the screen. They just put up, the district is below statewide averages, and we're below the district. Well, the truth is only 8 out of 10 students were failing to read at grade level. 8 out of 10. And
Thank
some
you,
of the
Ms.
schools are 9 out of 10 failing to read on grade level.
Thank you, Mr. Love.
Thank you.
For the presentation of this evening's revenue and expenditure report, the chair recognizes Board Treasurer Matthew Oates.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, this month's report is through the end of June 30th. I've been asked to be sure that we clarify that while our fiscal year does end in June, these numbers do not represent our final numbers as they're unaudited. And so make sure that we're all clear on that. And we expect to get that. Our audit has started, and we will see that sometime this fall like we normally do. So page 1. Looking at our revenue and our expenditures, again, revenue's on top. We are trending very well there, where we have captured most of our revenue. We still have some revenue to be accrued at the federal level, and I guess at all levels, and so our end of year audit will reflect that. We wanted to just take a look here at our federal one. Right now, year to date, we're at $40.3 million federal aid, and that's compared to about $43.4 million last year, and that's due to reduction in grants and a determination of revenue that will be accrued at the end of this fiscal year. Looking at our expenditures, we're still trending the same there. So administrative, we're at roughly $6 million. Instruction, we're at $118 million. Support services, $45.8. Plant services, $26.6. Pupil transportation, $15.2 million. Community and adult services at $3.7 million, and then our debt service, which consists of our the the energy performance contract and allow the construction bonds that we started for this year. We're at $8.4 million on that. So revenue over expenditure, total revenue, we're at $232.8 million for the year, and our total expenditures are at $223.7 million. So we're roughly $9 million over here at the end of the year. And again, it should be noted that these numbers only represent where we are at the end of June. There's still money going out, money coming in. So we'll see those final numbers in this fall. So the familiar pie graph that we always have. The first one is where our money's come from. As we see again, our local, county, and state represent a large majority of our funds. And where the money is going, again, we see that our instruction and indirect classroom spending makes up a majority of our services, or makes up a majority of our expenditures. And finally, our revenues and expenditures chart here. The blue line, excuse me, the blue line represents our revenue. Red line represents our expenditures, and as you see, we have moved closer, which is what we would expect here towards the end of the year. And as long as our blue line is still over our red line, we're trending well. So at this point, I'll open it up for any questions.
Board Member Manser?
I know that the governor has done some withholds on the budget, and some of those dollars include education dollars. I think transportation being one, and I know there's been a couple of other things identified. Could we, at a future meeting, get an update on the status of those withholds and what that's going to look like for us in the coming year?
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Oates, for your report. Now the board chair recognizes Mr. Ivan Nugent, who is sitting in for Dr. Bedell, to present our workshop.
Thank you, Madam Board Chair. Tonight's presentation is over Board Policy 4.2, and specifically we will be presenting to the board on trainings for our staff, both for our supervisors as well as our school-based staff. The presentation tonight will be by Jennifer Collier, our Chief of Human Resources, and Molly Tickner, our Executive Director of Mental Health Services.
Good evening, Jennifer Collier, Chief Human Resources Officer. This evening I'll be covering Board Policy 4.2 and some of the things that we're doing as a district to address this policy in regards to the trainings and the information that is disseminated to our employees. And then following my portion, Molly Tickner will be going further in detail around our trauma-sensitive efforts and how those apply as well to this policy. So Board Policy 4.2 states, the superintendent shall neither cause nor allow KCPS circumstances for staff, including employees, independent contractors, and volunteers that are unfair, undignified, unsafe, disorganized, or unclear, or fail to recognize collective bargaining agreements that have been negotiated with KCPS. Oh, I'm sorry, it wasn't moving at first. Okay, so some of our current measures that we have in place to address Policy 4.2 includes our Safe Schools training, and in just a moment I'm going to go in detail on each one of these items, but we have Safe Schools training that's currently in place. We also have our CBA and training that's provided for our employees, both our leaders and the other employees across the district for those units in which it applies. Also our employee handbook, which is a new piece of information that we have for our employees. This year, we're excited about this rollout. Our new employee onboarding, and then also our leader supervisor professional development that will be offered this school year. So those last three items are new items for KCPS. Okay, so Safe Schools Training, just so everyone knows, this is an online training module. It is sent out to all of our employees, and it doesn't matter what position you hold, whether it's certified, classified, full-time, part-time. Anyone who enters our schools, who serves our students, must take the Safe Schools Training. And just a little bit of data around last year, the completion date for last school year was October 31st, and the totality of time that was dedicated to the modules were 3 hours and 22 minutes. Last year, we had an 88% completion rate, and so you can see there the numbers that we had complete out of a total number of employees. This school year, our completion date is also September 5th, and the modules will be a total of 4 hours and 42 minutes. On this slide here, you'll see these are the actual modules that are provided for our employees, and you can see it's a number of really critical informational items that our employees must take, including customer service, the bloodborne pathogens, sexual harassment, whether that's staff on staff or staff to students, Title IX training, active shooter training, homeless student awareness, child abuse, neglect. These are all of the items that our employees must complete through the Safe Schools Training. And on the right side, you see the amount of time that's devoted to each of those modules. And so over the course of the time that it rolls out, our employees will have probably a little over a month or 2 months to complete this training, and rollout will begin on July 31st. Part of the reason why we're rolling it out earlier, we like to get our school staffs trained earlier, and so we know the sooner that we can get that out to them, the sooner they can get it completed. Our collective bargaining agreement training and notification. We are really excited about the successful completion of our negotiation process with the American Federation of Teachers Union. Also, we have our CBAs that have been agreed upon and voted on. On July 12th, the board approved it. And then we also provided an overview of what the CBA entails, including some of the recent changes that were made in this last negotiation season. Our principals got a few highlights last week during the leadership summit. It was not a full training for them yet because we're going to do a joint training with the AFT for our principals and leaders, but we did provide them the highlights so that they are aware of what some of those changes are and they can go and reference those items. We also will be providing training for our the remainder of our employees, and one of the ways that we're going to make sure that everyone's aware not only of what the CBA entails, but also the changes will be a key change document. We're working to draft that, and we will have that posted to the website so that our employees can reference that as well. And then we are currently in negotiations with the SEIU unit. So we're expecting that we will complete negotiations with them later this fall. Okay, moving on to the new employee handbook. The employee handbook is just about ready to be posted, and our goal is to have it posted by August 1st so that as our new employees and returning employees come back, they have this information that will be in the handbook, and this will be provided and available to all of our employees as well as any other stakeholders that are interested in knowing what the new handbook entails. There's some key topics that are covered in the handbook. As you can see there, they're listed. And so all of these items will be detailed in our employee handbook so that everyone has a clear understanding of what expectations are, policies, and procedures for KCPS. And one of the things that you'll note in the handbook is that as we go through each item, you'll also see a reference to an administrative policy that is related to those topics. And so not only will they have the information in the handbook, but they will also have information that points them to the policy that they can reference that correlates with that particular piece of information. We're also going to be training our employees on the handbook. That will be coming up on August 11th. We are training employees' last names A through L in the morning, and then the afternoon M through Z. So we want to make sure that we get all of our employees, and that's primarily our central office staff, trained on the employee handbook, making sure they understand what this includes, and then giving them an opportunity to ask questions if they have them, and just clarifying any information that's needed. The next piece is a new onboarding training. We're really excited that we rolled out our new onboarding on July 3rd. A couple of our new executives were a part of that training. We got very positive feedback from them. And so we are excited that we no longer sort of have a skeleton onboarding process, but it's very robust. It covers the priorities, the things that are important to us as KCPS. So when people come to us, they understand who we are, what we value, what we are expecting from our employees. I bolded those items that are really critical that we're focusing on in new onboarding. We're talking about our strategic plan, and it's an intro summary so that they know what this plan will consist of. We also are covering cultural competency, and this is for every employee, not just for our teachers. We want everyone who comes to KCPS to understand the importance, first of all, what is cultural competency, what is equity in practice, what is trauma-informed care, and they understand what it is and what it looks like in practice. And so that's some of what we're doing in the new employee onboarding for that first day. The other piece that we added to the new employee onboarding that we're very excited about, this is primarily for our instructional staff, for our teachers. Instead of sending them out on day 2 to go to schools without ever looking at the curriculum or diving into the curriculum, they will have a full day with our curriculum and instruction team. So they will have the team there to let them know where they should be as far as pacing is concerned, and other critical questions they have around the curriculum. They'll receive that on day 2. So when they go to the classroom the next day, they are equipped and prepared to dive right into the curriculum with students. And we don't have a situation where it almost feels like a sub because they don't have an idea of where they are and where they should be in the curriculum. So we're really excited about having added this piece to our new onboarding process. In addition to that, we have what is called our First Friday trainings. And so I have to take a moment to acknowledge Mr. Nugent, Ivan Nugent, and his team in leading this effort. These are trainings that are going to be provided for our principals, our directors, and supervisors. And so there are going to be a total of 8 trainings provided throughout the year. As you can see, they're already planned out and dated. Every person within this particular group, all of our leaders, anyone who supervises anyone, must attend 6 of these 8 trainings in the year. So they can choose from this menu. 2 of the dates are mandatory for our principals. As you see, they're October 6th and February 2nd. And then for our classified staff, supervisors, and directors, they are required to attend on December 1st and April 6th. But outside of those mandatory sessions, everyone must attend at least 6 of the 8. And the really neat part about this is in the past, we've always had a way to post and track our school staff professional development. Well, we've now added some accounts in our My Learning Plan where all of our employees now can go in, sign up for professional development, and then that way we know who's going to attend, and we also have a tracking mechanism now. We'll know who has actually completed the 6 of the 8 trainings that are required for the people in this group, our leaders and supervisors. And as you can see, there's some very critical areas around leadership and management that will be covered over the course of the school year. The other piece that I want to add is that Mr. Nugent and his team also are assessing what the needs will be as we go throughout the year. So if there are other items, critical items that arise, those will be included where we can in these sessions. So we're remaining flexible in this to make sure that we're actually addressing topics and items that are really critical to our everyday work needs. Additional training that will be provided for all of our employees, and as you see there, this will be for whether you are a supervisor or not. If you're wanting training in any of these areas, that will be around the evaluation, whether it's the teacher evaluation you're wanting more data or information on, the principal, or the classified, and these will be provided as well through My Learning Plan. Also, there will be sessions around workplace expectations, effective communication, both oral and written, employee benefits. We're discovering that lots of people have questions around their benefits, and so we want to provide opportunities for them to go in and to get more training, to ask questions, and be really clear about the benefits that they have selected. Also, we're providing training this year for our administrative assistants, so everyone who serves in the role of an administrative assistant will receive training this year around a number of items. And so we're really excited about that. We have quite a few new administrative assistants, so we want to make sure that they are well trained and prepared for those roles. We will also have training around the grievance policy, making sure that our employees understand what that looks like, what the steps are, what the process looks like. And then finally, around retirement planning, we want to make sure that our employees are well informed and making sound decisions and have clarity around their plans around retirement. We know that's a very important time in people's lives, and we want to make sure that we've done all that we can as an employer to prepare our employees for this stage of life. Questions?
Mr. Evans and then Ms. Wolfsey.
Ms. Collier, would you go back to slide number 2, I think, with the statistic data on it?
Slide 2, I think that was the,
Yeah, I think that was the one you just, maybe it's not 2. It's the one with the training and the number of,
safe school training.
yeah, I think it may be the next one. Yeah,
Okay.
I see where it says, now, because over the years, our customer service, as we all know, have taken a hit, okay? For example, when you call the board, you get prompts, and the prompts can be rather complicated. And, dial this number, dial that number. So it's kind of hard to reach a department. For example, if I wanted to talk to the superintendent, I would have to go through several prompts to get there, and still may not get there, okay? Because it seemed like gatekeepers. I was at Central the other day, and there were 2 ladies sitting in the chairs at the front office, and both of them asked me what did I need. That was a pleasant reception. I know, and they didn't know that I was a board member, but board members, if they know that you're coming, kind of get a little preferential treatment. But I'm wondering, how you train your secretarial staff in schools and at the board level to receive people without, say, feeling like they're being intruded upon. I think meeting people initially is very, very important, whether it's at the board building or whether it's in schools. So I see 10 minutes for training. So what is that? What does that mean?
In the module, there will be information about how to greet people, the types of statements that you make when you encounter people, the time frames in which you is acceptable for responses. So within 24 hours, you'll answer emails, phone calls, things like that. But I think, to your point, I think a lot has to do with leadership. So when you talk about what you experienced and saw at Central, I think leaders have an opportunity to set expectations. So while we have district expectations, it's incumbent, or it's very important that our leaders also have that same philosophy, and they are sharing that with the employees that work in their buildings and in their departments, and they're modeling that for people. So as leaders model it and hold people to those expectations, I think we're going to see more and more really good customer service. And some of the customer service items are covered in that principal, director, and leadership training. So when we cover that topic, those are things that we're going to be talking about with our leaders, that we expect for them to model good customer service, but also to expect that then of the employees who they are responsible for supervising.
Board Member Wolfsey.
Thank you for the presentation. I have 2 questions. One, so standard operating procedures are something we've been talking about a lot. And to me, it seems like a natural key performance indicator, because are those, if my understanding is correct, those are kind of those documents that say this is how we do things. And so to me, that directly addresses the disorganized and unclear component of this board policy. So I didn't know if that was something that you guys might be adding to this as a KPI.
And I probably should have included that, because that was something that was required of all of us across all leaders to establish SOPs within our departments, and that was done last fall. And so to my understanding, every department now has established those standard operating procedures.
And it's not a follow-up, it's a little bit of a separate, but then one other thing, kind of, I'm focused on that disorganized or unclear part, because I think so much of how we'll be able to improve is if we have a way to address that. And so by that, one of my questions is, how does a member of staff get their voice or their feedback to administration if something is unclear or maybe to them appears disorganized. So that maybe a SOP could get adjusted or you incorporate that into training. Is there a feedback mechanism?
I don't know if we've established a clear feedback mechanism for around that. I guess it's informal in a sense that employees would talk to their supervisors about it, but I don't know if we have a district-wide system where people will, other than maybe ask the superintendent. Okay.
One, we have Ask the Soup email, which we do get just, different kinds of comments, concerns, those kinds of things. We also are implementing Let's Talk, which is a K-12 insight mechanism that they'll be able to report things on our website, and it'll get to the right person that way rather than having to follow through with emails. It goes to a dashboard, which makes it a lot easier. And the other thing we're doing this year is skip level meetings. So people are going to be able to not necessarily have to address their supervisor, because that obviously can be uncomfortable, but talk to someone else outside of their department to kind of report back on how things are going, how things are getting done, that kind of thing.
Board Member Morris?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I am encouraged by the new handbook and the new trainings, and it's in line. I'm on. Okay, it's in line with what Board Member Wolfsey asked about, just in keeping our ducks in a row. How do we track compliance for these things? Because what I didn't hear, I heard that there are requirements now that you have to attend professional development, and there's an increase in expectations of the team, which is awesome. But are these trainings offered on a rolling basis? And if so, how are we tracking that everybody has been trained adequately? Is the training on an annual basis? So perhaps a document that would show what's required versus what's optional, and maybe better insight into how we're going to track or monitor these things are happening for every single employee would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, and for the Safe Schools training, what's there, once again, that is it's an online system, so we are able to track day by day the number of employees who have actually completed it, and then also who has completed it. And so we do monitor that. Our department, once we hit that due date and we see that there are people that still have not completed, we then forward that information out to supervisors for them to address their employees to say, hey, we see that you've not completed Safe Schools training. Also, the employees receive a reminder from Safe Schools training saying it's beyond the deadline, you've not completed. So there are two avenues where we're communicating and tracking that with our employees. But in terms of the other training, the one for the principals, directors, and leaders, that one is now going to be posted on my learning plan. We're able now to track as well for these folks where we have not been able to do that in the past. When they go on and they register for a course, once the course is done, if they've attended, they will get credit, and it's logged there in that system. So we can go back at the end of the year and see for every person which courses they actually have taken, and if they actually did all 6 of the trainings. And at that point, we're then able to report back to the supervisors or directors or leaders to say, these people are in compliance, they've completed these trainings, these are the folks who did not. So we do have a better tracking, I think, now at all levels, where we have not always had that in the past.
Okay, so to confirm, we do have tracking and a monitoring system in place to ensure compliance for all these new training systems?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Oates?
Hi, thank you for that presentation. I thought it was very good. One thing, my questions are more around the monitoring report. I think you guys did a very good job, especially covering everything in the KPIs that the board policy asked for. I thought it was a good job. One question, or I guess maybe one suggestion around the interpretation. Board policy 4.2, a lot of it goes around, as Ms. Wolfsey was saying, around instructions that are either disorganized, unclear. I see subject staff to rules or expectations that are unachievable or confusing, unprepared, unaware, uninformed. One thing I don't see in the interpretation is anything that talks about that the district will inform staff. Like, a lot of it's around treatment of staff as far as ethical guide, but not much in the interpretation that speaks to that. We will be sure that staff is informed. And I see in the KPIs, there's a lot in there about informed, but I think it'd be good to put that in somewhere in that interpretation,
Okay.
that's what we're seeing.
Okay. Noted.
Board Member Manser?
And thank you for the presentation. I'm particularly interested in those First Friday trainings. I think the content looks good, and I'm wondering if that's something that would be available for board to at least access the information. I think that is a really critical start. My interpretation of your interpretation of Board Policy 4.2 is I think what you're trying to tell us is that by putting this kinds of content in place, this kind of training, continuity, the tracking mechanism, so we can ensure completion, that positions the district better to ensure that employees can have a sense of they know what is expected of them and how they should operate and how others should treat them. So I believe that's what you're trying to convey here in this process.
Yes, I think what our goal is, and as we're interpreting this, that we are putting some things in place, first of all, to establish what the expectations are, making sure that they're clear, also making sure that all employees are fully informed, so that there are some opportunities for them to engage in this, in some of like the handbook and new content that they've not had before, and to ask questions. So like when we have those training sessions with our employees, giving them those opportunities to really be informed, to ask questions if there are still items that are unclear in some of these, and then also the tracking and monitoring.
Okay. So I think one of the things that this is a really important first step, because many of the complaints that we hear sometimes from staff or out in community is that the lack of consistency or continuity, something may be happening in one building that is not happening in another building. And we know that our principals and building leaders are the sort of, that is really the first line leadership in many ways, more so than cabinet level positions. So when you talk about in the My Learning Plan, and our principals and building leaders will sign up for those elements, you'll be able to see what they are doing. Will there be, will your senior cabinet members who are dealing with school leadership, will they be looking more frequently to ensure that they can see there is, that they're seeing that kind of engagement at the principal level, so that you know that those principals who are really carrying, they have that leadership responsibility, culture responsibility for building level, that they're really staying on track, and that you're seeing that they are taking full advantage of everything that's offered?
Yes, and actually school leadership was a part of helping to design this process. So they have been in on this from day one, talking about what's reasonable for our principals, and then also making sure they're going to be reinforcing with the principals that they must attend these trainings. And not only will the principals have to attend, but the supervisors must attend as well. So the notice about these trainings went out to executive team members. We must attend 6 of the trainings, as well as our principals and directors and all others. I think even Dr. Bedell got the notice on the First Friday training. So it really went out to all leaders or supervisors. Anyone who may be evaluating or supervising another employee has to attend these.
Any other questions? One of the steps that we would want to implement, that we've discussed, is really giving the administration clear direction as it relates to the KCPS interpretation. But it looks like there are some additional things that we would like to see come back before we take that action. So if it's the pleasure of the board, we would not want to take action on the interpretation before we get that information back in a newly written interpretation, because I heard some feedback given. Is that correct? Okay. All right. Anything? Oh,
Thank you. Well,
thank you. Mr. Fierro?
Yes, Madam Chair. Was Molly going to be presenting?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And for the board members' information as well as the community, with regards to policy 4.2, one piece is not going to be discussed tonight, and that is how all of this pertains to our independent contractors and volunteers. We are going to be looking at that, and we'll report back in January, which is when I believe 4.2 does come back around for a workshop.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good evening. Hi, I'm Molly Tickner, the Director of Mental Health Services, so I'll be reporting on the 4.2 interpretation from our perspective. I just wanted to review, we did present to you all back in January of the Division of Student Support Services goals, and so that's the slide that you're looking at now. Is we created these goals in order to support the social emotional needs of our students, and so you can kind of look those over as well. So that is what we're basing our whole department on in every action that we do. We have inherited, as you all might know, our department has grown from about 9 individuals to a little bit over 100 individuals. And so you now have in front of you our new org chart, which incorporates Dr. Louise Cordoba as the chief and administrative assistant, myself as the mental health director. We now have supervision over the nurses as well as the whole security department and the student discipline department. And so we felt like this was a very strategic move on the part of you all and the cabinet in making this decision, because now we have the ability to collaborate internally as a division with some key roles that really lend support to our students and our families. So we're very excited for this blending of our departments. The board policy 4.2, we've elaborated on that to what I took was I looked at the policy even further, and 1 and 2 is really what we're going to be focusing on, is that our staff are not to fail to provide for appropriate protective child abuse, sexual harassment, anti-bullying, and intimidation policies that are communicated to staff, volunteers, and administrative personnel, plus permitting staff to be unprepared to deal with emergency situations, which is what our KPIs are driven on, is staff preparedness to help educate them on these policies, procedures, and protocols, and prepare them to deal with emergency situations, whether that's a medical emergency or a mental health emergency. What you have in front of you is a lens, a quick lens of a 3-year plan that Dr. Cordoba and our department created that we presented to the cabinet at the strategic planning retreat. So I wanted to share a couple of the items with you. This is how we're tracking our outcomes. We have 3 goals, and you guys have a copy of this document in your electronic, so you can feel that it's about a 12-page document. And what we've done is we've created action items under our objectives, and we've highlighted particulars in yellows that we wanted our cabinet and you as the board to focus on, because those are the areas for improvement. This is our tracking system. It's a working document, and so you can kind of see how we're tracking. If you look at goal number 1 was to improve the KC Public District culture that promotes trauma-sensitive schools practices throughout all systems in a culturally responsive manner, and then we broke it down to objectives, and we related those objectives directly to board policy. And then you scroll down a little bit and you can see that, those action items in order to establish and promote highly effective trauma-sensitive school climates. The green little symbol is the things that are completed, and then the blue little square is whether it's in progress, and then we have a timeline date for a deadline, as well as items that are not started. And when you look thoroughly through that document that was sent to you guys electronically, you can see that we've actually completed a lot of our 3-year plan already. So this document is really holding us accountable to look into our action items. I wanted to highlight just a couple things, and Jennifer spoke to one of them, was we really want to be able to educate you all and our cabinet on what we're doing and what we're holding our schools and our staff accountable to. So one of the requests that we have is that we schedule a time to meet with you guys as the board, as well in conjunction with the senior cabinet, on a trauma-sensitive schools retreat. So we would like to be able to share with you what trauma-sensitive schools is, how you as an administrative board can help oversee that and lead it, as well as our cabinet, because we feel like in order for trauma-sensitive schools to work, it has to come from the top down as well as the bottom up. So that was just one area that we wanted to highlight to put to you all to challenge you to find a date where we can all get together so we can share this information with you. some standard and operating procedures that we have created, which I'm really excited about in conjunction in support of the 4.2 policy, specifically is the suicide prevention policy procedure. You can note that we have trained a certain amount of individuals. What I will report on is, yes, it's great to have numbers and people trained, but we can see results to this based on the training that we have done on the suicide prevention policy and procedure and the development of a risk screening assessment. We've trained all of our school counselors, our school nurses, our administration in the schools, plus our school social workers in this model and this procedure. And we had we started tracking the number of those risk assessments that came through our door. We had 35 students from August to the end of the school year who had a reported suicidal ideation or attempt that was reported to us. And I'm happy to say that we had 0 incidents of successfully completed suicides this school year that we know of our students. We did have 1 incident in the beginning of the school year with an alumni student from Lincoln College Prep Academy. However, that's the only reported suicide of a KCPS student, which I believe maybe I wasn't here before, but we're excited to say that I think that has something to do with our ability to screen early so that we can provide intervention and help our students before they get to that point. Another highlight that I would like to draw your attention to in terms of the KPIs is we've also done a lot of trauma-sensitive schools training in our schools. We have trained over 1,403 KCPS participants in trauma-sensitive schools training on some level throughout this last school year. And I wanted to share some of the highlights with you in terms of we did surveys with majority of those participants, and 104 out of 148 participants, which is nearly 70% of our participants that were surveyed, increased their understanding and knowledge of the subject matter on what is trauma do to the brain, and what strategies can I use in my classroom or my role if I'm outside the classroom. We also received very positive feedback on the forms in 91% of our evaluations. And just some of the qualitative feedback that we received, if I can share with you some of the feedback that we received from staff. One individual said, "I will be more aware of my interactions with all students at all times." Another one said, "This was the best professional development the district has ever provided me." And the other one said, "Need more time for this information." So we are excited to say that we are making a difference. And I know a question came up earlier when Jennifer was presenting about how we are educating our front desk staff on customer service. One of the things that we are doing is we're not only teaching this to our teachers, we're teaching this to all the school staff. So we actually have a secretary's training on trauma-sensitive schools, which basically is quality customer service and showing compassion for individuals, and that is scheduled for August 8th. So every single front office person will be part of that training. These are just a few of our other accomplishments that we had. We've worked really hard to create our department SOPs. We've trained all of our staff on the standard operating procedures. We've done school-based needs assessments. You guys also have a copy of that in your electronic documents. I want to highlight something on that document that's not included in this PowerPoint presentation. Through the school-based needs assessments that we did in conjunction with school leadership and our CIPD department, we found out that over 80% of our schools wanted to have more social emotional support in their schools, and that was even over basic needs for their buildings. And so we felt obviously that we're doing some good work, but we have some room for improvement. So I believe with this new year coming around, we have the ability to provide more support for our families. We have added additional trauma-sensitive school social worker this year who is bilingual, so we can reach the ELL population and a high Latino population. And we're also adding another family support specialist, hopefully who will be bilingual, so we can, again, reach out to the communities and meet the families where they're at. And so with that extra support, plus contracting with Truman Medical Center Behavioral Health and Maddie Rhodes to provide that on-site therapeutic support and consultation to various schools. There are a few challenges that you are all made aware of. Is we do need streamlined data collection to report interventions and outcomes. I am excited to say that we are like 98% the way there in terms of creating forms and documents online, so that and documentation for our social workers and our support staff to be able to track the outcomes of the interventions. Currently in Tyler, we do not have the systems for our social workers and support staff to document so that we can pull the data and track, does this intervention actually lead to a positive outcome for that particular student? We are almost there. So that's exciting to know that hopefully in early fall, we will be able to roll that out and train with people on where to document and how to use that so that we can track the data. Obviously, availability and time for professional development is huge. We've had to work within a very tight schedule to train particular staff. The collective bargaining agreement has made it somewhat difficult in order to reach some certain staff, but now that there's been some changes in the CBA, we're excited to be able to create a more robust professional development schedule around trauma-sensitive schools and mental health practices, suicide prevention, child abuse and neglect. And to be honest, we really do need more additional social emotional support. The reality is we have 4 social workers for 38 schools. So right now we're in the space where we're kind of putting out fires, but I think we're doing a pretty bang-up job. So, and then really aligning the board policy and the administrative policies with trauma-sensitive language so that from the top of the policies to our SOPs, they are in that language. Any questions?
Questions? Yes, Dr. Hartsfield?
Thank you for your presentation. I just had one question. I heard you talk about the contracting that we do with Mattie Rhodes and with Truman Behavioral. I think it was last week I read where Blue Springs had now developed a relationship with Children's Mercy where Blue Valley.
Blue Valley.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I understand as being very, very helpful because they as a teaching and it doesn't seem to be costing that district any money. Are we investigating, since we do have Truman, and I heard the young man from research who's all, there seems to be a multitude of opportunities, St. Luke's, that we can involve some of those in a similar type of arrangement where, since we are so trauma affected, and so yeah, are we investigating those types of relationships?
It's interesting that you asked that question because we had just recently applied for a very significantly large H&R Block grant, and we wrote in that the need for more social emotional support and particularly more licensed clinical social workers in our schools. And so that is one area that we're looking at funds in order to be able to provide, either whether that's through contracts with Truman or community mental health centers or actually hiring of internally more licensed clinical social workers to fill those roles. I will tell you that we are currently contracting with Truman to provide licensed clinical social workers or licensed qualified mental health professionals in 4 of our schools, and that's through another grant. Unfortunately, that is a non-renewable grant that is going to be ending at the end of this academic year. So right now we're having to rely on grant funds because a lot of our community mental health centers honestly don't have the dollars just to upfront and lend us their people without the noting that they're going to be able to support that salary. And so right now, what we've really been exploring is grants to be able to bring people in through contracts or internally.
Well, I do appreciate that, but I would hope that we do have some that are able to do that, such as St. Luke's, that could actually do that, and also just because they themselves receive money that allow them go into an educational entity that they receive the funds. So I would just hope that we would investigate how Blue Valley made that relationship and see if we can have one as well that might not necessarily rely on us providing funds.
Right. We will look into St. Luke's.
Board Member Fierro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm glad that my colleague brought up the Blue Valley example, and I would agree with that. And if we could verify who did absorb the cost of the social workers. I was in a meeting this afternoon with Dr. Brucetti with the Jackson County Mental Health Levy and was talking about the seriousness of really needing more social and emotional support in the schools. And we talked about the Blue Valley partnership with Children's Mercy Hospital. And it was my understanding in reading the article, and I have a copy of it, I thought Children's Mercy paid for that, and he told me it was the Blue Valley School District that paid them for that. So if we could look into that, but I agree with my colleague, we do need to look at forming partnerships, but also I would appeal to the board that we do need to look at the future of this issue. It's not going away, and at some point we're going to have to invest dollars. you know, I'll just take a neighboring school district that I know of, a provider working in that school district, been in one school for over 8 years, and that district has never given money to that nonprofit, and it's showing success. And when the approach is to that district, it's like, well, that's great, you know, continue doing what you're doing as long as we don't have to pay. And the challenge is when you have like a Jackson County mental health levy, they're very limited in how much of their funds you can use in the schools. And then you have foundations who are saying, well, okay, we know that's important, but that's the school's responsibility. So again, I think it requires a bigger discussion, and would just ask my colleagues to consider addressing that somehow. Maybe there is an ad hoc committee that works with staff. Thank you.
Board Member Manser.
So you can see we're all very interested in the fact that Blue Valley Schools got 19 like social
We
workers.
just found out from Miss Allen that the school district Blue Valley provided over $650,000 to provide those 18 social workers.
So, but I think what it highlights is our keen interest in this as a board, and I appreciate the opportunity in the future for us to have participate in that training. And I fully recognize and sympathize with the limitations of foundation funding and some of the lack of continuity, but I encourage you to continue to pursue those grant opportunities and think about ways that you can pursue system investments, because those have a longer lasting, including the Jackson County Children's Services Fund, which our district and our board endorsed, and those funds should be available. So I think one of my questions is, how and in what fashion do we let our parents know, and as they come into schools, that that's a school that's trauma informed and trauma has a informed and trauma-aware approach, and what does that mean for them? Because we know that a lot of times the adults have trauma, and that plays out. And so, have we gotten to the place yet? I know you have to do first steps first, but I'm just curious what your thinking is about the parent education component.
The one area with our current pilot schools that are on the journey to become trauma sensitive, and I will say, Board Member Manser, that it is a long journey, and so even the schools that have been on this journey since about 2013 are not there. And research shows that it takes about 7 to 10 years to change an organizational culture, and really what we're doing is we're changing organizational culture. However, what we've noticed in the schools that are starting to practice on the lens and starting to model that behavior is the parents are more engaged in those schools. So the engagement of the families is showing that it's a trauma-sensitive school, and they're starting to meeting the families where they're at, rather than the traditional means of having family meetings. They're actually going out in the communities. The parent liaisons or the family support specialists and the staff are communicating more effectively with the parents, linking them with services, and you can tell by the number of parents that attend parent-teacher conferences and that are coming into the building and sharing that sense of community. Also within Ms. Allen's role in the new family engagement specialist and the community. I know Samara has like an insanely long title, so I can't throw it off my head. But we're working very closely with with that department in order to find out outside the box ways to engage our families, regardless if it's a trauma sensitive school or not. So that's an area that we're really focusing on that is integral, as well as doing parent education. The trauma-sensitive schools, I will reference J.A. Rogers, has done a lot of parent education nights where they provide food for the families to have them, to engage them to come. And then they educate them on trauma. They educate them on how they can support them and provide resources in the buildings, and doing parent nights to link them with healthcare and other areas, but, educating them on what trauma-sensitive schools is. Yep.
Board Member Wolfsey.
Ms. Tickner, I want to just acknowledge, I know this is a long game and you've been at this for a while, but I really, I'm very appreciative of you and your department and all the work that you're doing, and I just encourage you to keep going. So
we won't stop.
Communities and Schools is another program that's getting ready to enter into our schools, and I know that this is an area that they perhaps could be another lever that we could use. So I was just, one of the points I think you had on your slide was collaboration, and so are you planning to work with those, and if so,
I actually
how?
just reached out to them today because I just realized they're going to be in a few of our schools. I didn't even know who they were. So actually Samara and I are going to be scheduling a meeting with them to talk about how we can collaborate, because I noticed on their flyer and on their website when I did some investigating that they talk about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 level needs, and I just want to make sure that our strategies are aligned and our SOPs are aligned and our philosophies are aligned. And that's the other really big area that we're looking at, Board, is that we are looking at our community partners that are currently in our schools, plus are coming to the table to want to be in our schools, to make sure that they're aligned with the trauma-sensitive lens. And we're also developing a plan to look at how, I know that Mr. Nugent spoke about volunteers and contractors, about how we can incorporate our volunteers and contractors into something like our new hire orientation, so they can get that cultural competency and equity in practice and trauma-informed care training, so that they know what the foundations of our schools are. So, yes.
Can I say one? It, to me, is the epitome, what you said, when we were going through strategic planning. Matu, you put up the arrows going in all different directions. When we get the directions all pointing in the same, when they're in alignment, that's when we'll get the exponential lift, and that is the long game.
Yeah, we're there. We're getting there.
Board Member Lewis.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. My paper is very written up here, so I'm going to try to minimize it here. One of the things, the biggest things that when I hear presentations like this, I am the person that's yearning for the big picture. And I appreciate and value putting emphasis on we're doing the best we can and the bang up job. But in the same sentence, you said we only have 4. You have to realize we only have 4. My question will always be, how many do we need? My question will be that when I'm looking at a budget and being asked to approve it. My question will be there when that word equity always comes up. I can't say that we're doing things equitably if I don't know where the need is. If I don't know what percentage of our kids are being exposed to trauma, I can't celebrate that 40% got the services or whatever it is. So at some point, I would love to hear these types of reports celebrating what we are able to do, but at the same time screaming from the rooftops what still needs to be done. And because when we talk about all means all either really needs to mean all, and we have to constantly say what percentage of it, and by building level. I can't wait to look at that assessment by building level.
You'll see it.
What percentage of students on average are exposed to trauma? And then are we equitably do we need to put all 4 of those people at one building? I mean, I just don't know how to react to this until I get the whole picture. The other piece is the bilingual part. I'm assuming bilingual means 2 languages, and the other language is Spanish. So when we have so many languages spoken in our district, how do we even begin to make sure that our students that are just entering and the families don't speak, how do we make sure that they're okay? The individual building level needs assessment. I noticed we did that October 2016. How do we even begin to keep ahead of the need if we have on average 41% mobility, but that's just the average. In some buildings, it's even higher than that. So how do we, in our intake and our transfer, I don't know, how do we begin? And we're getting some of these and a lot of these in the middle of the school year from charter schools and things like that. So how do we keep ahead of, well, we can, I don't know how, but we can. And just what's the dollar sign cost? We report on training and things like that. I was a teacher for 5 years in the school district. to say I was traumatized. I was in the school and charter. I was just in the classroom for 5 years around kids that saw more hardship in the evening than I had seen in a lifetime, and I know what the toll it took on me. So from looking out from our teachers' perspective, how do we give them training? Yes, and heads up, this is going to happen, but is there a cost associated with shifting and building a culture and an environment that protects our teachers, and we're proactive about that? It's just a lot of layers, and the fact that communities and schools isn't the picture of the solution, that tells me that we're doing drive-bys or things in isolation, and I know that's a lot, and I know that we're making the mere fact that you're standing there, we're making progress. But, help me understand how long is progress supposed to take, and
I'm
the
going to try to
pieces that I'm
break this
supposed
down
to
a
see.
little bit.
And I don't even need answers tonight. I really don't.
I will say one thing, that when I presented to you all in January, that question was asked, and I'm not sure if it was you, Ms. Lewis, or if it was another individual, of what is the need. We truly need a social worker in every building. We need a licensed clinical social worker, someone that has that high-level therapeutic clinical work in every single building. And that cost, we actually did the math as we were applying for this H&R Block grant with overhead and fringe and all of the wonderful things that come with personnel. That's a $9 million price tag. So that's the cost to just having one licensed clinical social worker in every single one of our KCPS sites. In terms of, and I kind of took a little bit of notes, the needs assessment, the individual needs assessments that I spoke to were with just building leadership. However, that comprehensive needs assessment that you were given electronically, has numerous people went around and surveyed teachers, surveyed staff, surveyed principals, and even students. And there's categories in terms of like where teaching and learning needs are, where social emotional needs are, where building needs are. And what we did was we looked at that and we took out all the social emotional supports. So, and that's a revolving document. The teams are going to continue to do those needs assessments, continue to check off the list. What are those low hanging fruit that we can add? And then our office obviously is looking at the social emotional needs and supports and how can we currently meet that need, and then what do we need to do to meet the need in the future. And so that is a working document that we're constantly looking at as interdepartments, including our CIPD and our leadership, and then our Division of Student Support Services.
Board Member Hartsfield?
Yes, and I'm really glad we're having a conversation for me. And I look back at the article from the Fox, and when they talked about the $650,000, I looked at their numbers. They said that they have 22,000 students. They're going to get 19 social workers. We have 33 buildings. For $650,000, they're paying 19 social workers for a year, paying them $34,210. That would do us a lot of good. 19 for $650,000 is a wonderful deal. That would go over to many of our schools. For me, it's, and so it helps me as a board to try to talk about how do we prioritize some of our needs, because I just remember last week we were talking about looking at a plan for 1.4 million, but here we're talking about something else. So I think we can look at how do we prioritize the needs of our students who we talk about are in trauma, at a reasonable cost. So thank you for this information.
I would like to also add a comment in that I really support traditional social work, and was on record during our budgeting process to make sure that we at least looked at having social workers in our high schools, in each of our high schools, and shifting dollars from our SRO to really think about more preventative measures. But when you present to the board, when we have this meeting, it's important for me that we talk about how do we protect the district in this model from reinforcing implicit bias with trauma-informed care, because there is a conversation that says that, this could also be a way or a measure that we don't talk about some of the root causes, talk about race and poverty and things of that nature, and not reinforcing impediments to us believing that children, can learn and under any circumstance. So when you bring this to the board and educate us about this model, please talk about those protections that we're not, again, reinforcing that implicit bias. Any other questions?
Can I make one comment before? And Ms. Lewis, this is to your last question about one thing we are doing is we're implementing a compassion fatigue secondary trauma professional development series, and we've actually trained approximately about 100 people, including teachers, and some of our administrators came to that training as well. And so that's something that was offered in our summer institute, as well as there were multiple sessions offered by Truman. And then we're going to be doing a series to the new teacher orientation, which we did last year, this year, as well as during professional development days throughout the year. Because we do realize that if we're not taking care of our staff, it really doesn't matter how well we take care of our students. So we realize that this job is difficult regardless of what role you're in. So we need to give them strategies to be able to manage their own stress. We just did a week-long training with a company out of North Carolina called Pure Edge, who we had about 180 people from across the district. Actually, Sandra attended the training as one of our central office staff, and they came in to talk about stress management. They worked with all of our security officers as well for one full day, and then different cohorts of staff throughout the district. And so we are putting an emphasis on that, because I'm the first one to tell you that I had a seizure about 10, 15 years ago when I was working in a really bad job. And so for me, stress management and compassion fatigue is real.
Board Member Lewis, 10 seconds.
10 seconds. And then one other thing is that I always think about, now that we're doing what we need to do for our teachers that are in our system, how do we go one step ahead and work with the Teach for America's, the training institutions that are preparing our next round of teachers.
That's another great, and we're actually, this is exciting. I can answer these questions. We are actually working with UMKC and Webster and Park University to create mechanisms to educate not only our teachers, but our new social workers coming into the districts and our new just school staff in general. And part of that is also about the urban core and the culture of the urban core and preparing them for that. And so that's an area that we're really focusing on. We just recently applied for a significant amount of dollars along with Webster and Park in order to create a professional development institute out of Webster. So it would be they would be the fiscal agent, and we would be able to work with the people coming in and out of their social work and their counseling and their teacher programs at Park so that we can build capacity for that.
I do believe, I just was informed that Mr. Fierro has a motion regarding this topic.
Yes, I do, Madam Chair. I move that the board commit to a trauma-informed training as a demonstration of our support for Board Policy 4.2.
Second.
Is there any discussion? This will be a roll call vote. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Ms. Manser?
Yes.
Ms. Wolfsey?
Yes.
Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Oates?
Yes.
Mr. Fierro?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mrs. Morris?
Yes.
Dr. Hartsfield?
Yes.
And Ms. Robinson?
Yes, that is a majority in favor of the motion. It passes. Thank you so much, both of you, for your presentations this
Thank you.
evening. Is there anything else, Mr. Nugent?
No, Madam Chair.
There's no other items to come before the board. The meeting is adjourned.